Well, I thought I'd do a little more in-depth video on how this was made. This started out life as a 94 ZR580 that I got from a guy that lived up in big towns, and it didn't run at the time. He thought it was a stator. He had gotten two, and this was one of them, and the one ran and this one didn't, so I picked this one up and tinkered with it, and it turned out to be a dirty connection on one of the stator wires. However, the stator did end up failing out on the sand, so I'm sure the stator was probably on its way out, and that's why it got parked. This sled, by the time I had got it a couple months ago, hadn't ran since, I think, like 2010. And, let's see here, 2011. And so I drained the tank out because there was a bunch of water and some really, really old gas in there. And I had to clear out the lines, and I put some gas to it, and it ran good. It took a little bit of tinkering with the carbs, but it ran pretty decent. It's pretty clean inside. It's taken apart right now because I'm in the process of swapping the stator out. I guess evidently the stators on these were an issue, but if you come over here, a lot of people ask how it's been cooled. I got a lot of that on the news and whatnot. It's pretty simple, really. Instead of the hot water coming out of the top of the block and running through the heat sink that's in front of the track and the rear of the track, it goes from the top of the head to the head into the through here and into the radiator, and then pops out the radiator and then goes back and then goes back into the T, runs down and goes through your front, the front sink and the rear sink, and then comes back into the block. I've had some people ask, why did I put it here? It's because A, it didn't fit over the can, and B, even if it did, I'd be worried that the can would melt it because it's just a plastic radiator out of a 95 Honda Civic. And ignore the zip ties. I'm working for a more permanent solution. That's just what I had to do to make sure it actually functioned. Now that I know that it functions, I'm going to do I'm going to actually do some metal mounts. I'm probably going to have it bolt to the old, part of it's going to have to bolt to the old shroud this had for where the spare belt went. And it worked okay. I've had some people ask when I do the track. Nothing currently. The track is bone stock. I just ran some graphite dry lube, and it didn't seem to have any issues. You can see the Heliofax is fine. It didn't melt or anything, no scoring. But I plan on adding bogey wheels at some point. Either that or be giving it a rear swing arm, but probably bogey wheels because it seemed to do really well on the sand like that. I rigged up an actual temp gauge. It just plugs into where the old high temp light, or the temp light would have came in. Right there. It looks okay. I mean, I should have found one of the old Arctic Cat temp gauges, but I mean, it works. Everything else is pretty much bone stock, as you would imagine. On the side out here, I had to take a circular saw, if you can see it, and cut a few holes because the thought process was when the secondary pulley spins, it'll blow air across the radiator. Well, it didn't do a whole lot when there was no way to have it to come out of it. So drilled a couple holes. The radiator does stick out the bottom a little bit. Again, I'm going to find a little more permanent solution other than zip ties. But that seemed to work pretty well. Didn't have any issues with the radiator. And then the wheels, this was, again, more of a proof of concept than anything. So I'm gonna, maybe not on this one, but the next one I build, I'm gonna actually run, see if I can run some Predator 500 suspension up here, if I can make a little plate. If not, what I'll do is I'll build a little adapter that goes into where the old ski would have went through, and it'll have like an ATV hub with a disc brake, and I'll run another hydraulic cylinder or another master cylinder on the other side of the throttle there for your front brakes. But it broke down. The stator failed. We tested it. The stator's shot. Go figure. Again, I guess that was a problem on these. And so when we were towing in on the sand, this one had a little bit of outward toe on the front wheels. So when we were towing it in, the tie rod broke. Lovely. Ordered a new one, and it broke. Was trying to back out the adjustment a little bit, and it snapped. So I haven't got quite to putting it together yet, but it was fast. It did. The speedometer said 90, 97, but it was probably more along the lines of high 80s or high 70s, low 80s, given that these speedometers aren't the most accurate. But it was a super comfortable ride. I rode it for a couple hours without issue other than the stator, but no overheating issues or anything. And I think the stator was failing when I got it because I rode around my property a few times when I was building it, and it had the same similar issue where it would get warm and bog. So that was kind of my doing. I'm going to throw a stator on it, and I think I'm going to run a fan. I'm going to run a motorcycle battery that sits in the toolbox there, and then have a temp switch, and then probably build a little cut this out here where the radiator would sit, where those holes are, and put a little shroud over it, and then have a fan pull air from it, and see if I can make that look not nearly as atrocious as it sounds. Yeah, like I said, I live in Oregon, so snowmobiles, and I live towards the coast of Oregon, so sleds aren't really used a whole lot here, so I figured I'd give it a shot and see if I could make them useful around here, and it was fun. It did real well on the sand until it lost spark, so I think that'll be about it.